Hi, we're excited to be here today to engage in some discussion around the HELP framework developed by Ron Whitaker. We're focusing specifically on the E, which stands for equity versus equality. My name is Erin Barry, and I'm a project consultant at Montgomery County Intermediate Unit in the Office of Professional Learning. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, and we'll begin with Jesse.
My name is Jesse Gluckman. I am also a project consultant at Montgomery County Office of Professional Learning. And one of the passion projects I get to work on is universal design for learning when within the inclusive framework. And it's just two of my favorite things coming together. We're talking about equity, we talk about UDL. It just all sort of weaves together nicely when we talk through these frameworks. So I'm just really excited to be here.
And hi, I'm Mary Budzilowicz, and I am the director of the Center for Universal Design for Learning, Technology and Resources at Cabrini University. And I really think that Jesse did a wonderful job of explaining my passion as well. And that stems from my own daughter, who born with a disability and fully included at age 3. And that actually started me on that journey for universal design for learning, because I can tell you that a lot of what she experienced were not equitable practices.
Good day, colleagues. My name is Dr. Ron Whitaker, and I am the Culturally Responsive Assistant Professor of Education at Cabrini University, and also the Director of the Center for Urban Education, Equity, and Improvement at Cabrini University. And as mentioned, I guess I am the mad scientist of the HELP framework, and it's just really an honor to be in conversation today to really talk about this critically important issue, not just from an intellectual standpoint, but more so from the standpoint of how we're going to move forward through an equitable lens.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Rita Perez. I'm the Director of Student Services in the Upper Dublin School District. I'm really thrilled to be here to have this conversation with everyone. Equity has been part of my journey since I started in education a long time ago. So I'm really thrilled to be here as we move this into action.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So let's begin with our first question. We understand that the E is the difference between equity and equality, but what would you say is the profound difference between the two?
Well, I'm happy to go first here. I would say that in my work with teacher candidates and with teachers, actually, I find that oftentimes they see the terms as synonymous when we know that they are not synonymous terms. And the simplest of ways that I would explain it is that equity means that every student, each student gets what he or she needs. And I know that teachers and again, teacher candidates, I also often hear them talk about this concept of fairness, which they clearly misunderstand because they equate fairness with equality, meaning it's not fair if everyone doesn't get the same.
You know, Mary, I agree with you. A lot of times you'll hear that approach about giving every student the same thing, and then that is fair. But that is not fair. We need to give students what they need. And you know, for me, another piece that really stands out between the difference between equity and equality, equality doesn't require you to be free from bias, while equity does. And I think that's a really key piece. And I think that's what makes it difficult for some folks, because it's hard to take a look and understand and kind of interrogate your own biases.
Yeah, I think that's a really wonderful point.
Yeah, I think for myself, I have to really intersect the psychological into the conversation and really argue that there is head and heart dissonance. Oftentimes you'll hear individuals that will articulate language that sounds like equity, but their actions are completely different. And I think if we're really going to be true to equity, it's almost like my colleague, Dr. Perez said, then there are some things that we have to deal with, right? And we have to wrestle with isms and phobias and other barriers within our context. And then we also need to wrestle with, okay, how do we move forward? And are we going to be courageous enough to move? So I think that the head and the heart dissonance is also something that we really need to go a little bit deeper with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ron. I think, when we talk about the equity work in schools, we talk about creating, systems in schools that are equitable and allowing every student to take AP classes and all of that. We also have to think about what's happening in the classroom, because that's a system as well. And that's where I see a lot of the head and the heart aren't in the same place.
Absolutely.
I think that's sort of a nice segue to the next question, which is, we get a lot of research around equity, but it's very siloed, right? You can find out about how to deal with equity when we're talking about race. You can find out how we deal with equity when we're talking about ableism. But what I like to focus on is that a lot of those tenets within those pedagogies are very similar. And I think, one of the questions we're going to pose to this team is, how do you think we can get people to see that? How can we start to close the silos of this equity work to make it more equitable for students in the classroom?
Yeah, I think part of that, Jesse, if we talk a lot about, you and I talk a lot about the UDL guidelines, and I know that going back a couple of years ago to the 2017 conference, where a lot of this started for me, I do think we need to make it explicit. And I think that's what has come out of a lot of the work, is that people had a tendency to say, well, it's there. But people weren't seeing it as there. And I think that part of our job is to help people see it more explicitly. And you're right. And see the connections, that crosswalk that we can talk about with UDL and culturally responsive sustaining practices and social emotional learning. But I think we do need to help them to see the connection.
Yeah, I also believe that as we go forward with this work, it's almost as if it's a puzzle, that there's some other frameworks that can be intersected. So for example, I'm thinking about Kimberly Crenshaw's work around intersectionality, where she argues that there are multiple levels of oppression, right? That some individuals have to deal with. So that's another framework that really connects what you're talking about, Jesse, right? Now, at the core, I would also suggest that Kimberly Crenshaw's work is grounded in critical race theory. But, one of the tenets of critical race theory is when we have to look at the intersectional nature of what I would argue has always existed within society and also within schools.
Yeah, you make really great points, because one of the things I think about in this work is that we first have to start with ourselves, and we have to start with our identities and start with understanding how our identities intersect with each other, and then also take a look at our students and their identities and all of the intersectionality in order to really be able to implement true culturally responsive and sustaining practices in our classroom. It's not this set of strategies, I'm going to give it to you and implement them. We're still going to end up with the same opportunity gaps that we have right now, right? And so I think there's a lot of hard work that has to happen at the personal, individual level.
Right. And I think we have to feel the connections to those strategies, if that makes sense. Those emotional connections to those strategies. And you're right, not just something we pull out, but feeling the deep connection to why we do what we're doing.
But see, here's Mary, you're so true. But in order for us to feel the connection, it goes back to what Dr. Perez said, right?
Okay.
In many ways, going back to equity. If there's some tension with us feeling those connections, perhaps we're in the equality lane and not in the equity lane. If there's still some tension for us to feel the connections in terms of how individuals are oppressed on many different levels.
Right, or as we're moving and as we're feeling those connections moving us from equality to equity. Yes, I can clearly see that.
So ultimately, we want to be able to tie this back to the classroom and learners. And in thinking about that, what would you all say is one thing that you would like educators to sort of sit and reflect upon as we think or talk about equity?
Well, I'll start on that one. And I think it goes back to something that I just previously said with the previous question. I think it's really important when teachers are planning their instruction and looking at their curriculum, they're really inspecting how their own race, class, and identity are impacting what they're planning. And then the next step to that is to really understand how their students' race, class, and identities are impacting their planning. So representation is really important. And can students see themselves in what the teachers are presenting? Or is the teacher presenting material and activities that are really a reflection of themselves and their own experiences?
Yeah, and I can speak that Ron, because I know you and I have talked about that. We've had conversations about that very topic. You know, you can even hold yourself up as someone where you believe that you are doing the best job by your students. But I will tell you, again, coming off one of the symposiums a couple of years ago, where I really had to look at my own syllabus, even down to the images and videos that I was using in my classroom. And I recognized that I was not allowing all of my students to see themselves represented in the curriculum, in the syllabus, in the work that we were doing in the classroom. And that was a real wake up call. And that takes work, by the way. That takes work and commitment.
So here's one of the things that I would like to offer, and I argue this in the HELP framework, that it's interdisciplinary, but it's interdisciplinary very intentional, right? So what I'm arguing is that it also starts with the ways in which we are preparing our teacher candidates to enter into the profession. Here's what I would like to suggest. If we're really going to be committed to innovation and variation, then I would also argue that our students in our schools of education also should go visit the schools of business or the School of Engineering to understand how they are training their students. If we want to talk about innovation and variation, I believe that the School of Business has a lot to teach us. Have you ever been in a 21st century corporate environment? And if you walk in there, there's not desks just sitting next to each other. There may be a cubicle. There may be someone that has, just a little beanie bag, and that's where they want to work at. And that's how they flow. And someone else just has a chair. But the point is how they're committed to production, but understand that production is also diverse. But they want to create a culture in which everyone feels a sense of belonging, regardless of how they identify and how they work. Conversely, within educational context, it is 2021 and we're still operating as if it's 1921. And I think that in itself is one of the core problems that we are dealing with when we're having this discourse.
Ron and Rita, I would be curious. Ron, you just used a word there, culture. One of the things that I know, we're talking about what can we do for teachers? Well, as a teacher, as a learner, what has been so helpful for me on this journey is to recognize, Ron, that with you, I have a comfort level that I can say and recognize that it's okay to not know. It's okay to make mistakes. And I think that's really important to give teachers that space, to allow them to recognize that I don't always, I'm telling you, my own personal journey, that was a little difficult sometimes, but I've learned to let go. I've learned to not think about how others will judge me, because I've found these people that I can be authentic with. And I know, for instance, that I can come to you with any question. And I've said this to other people, and I know that you're not going to sit in judgment of me, but you're going to help me find the answer to that question. And Rita, I don't know if you experience that with your teacher.
Yeah, so it's really interesting what you said. It's a really nice dovetail to kind of what I was thinking. This equity work it's a journey, and it's a journey that I've been on for the better part of 2 decades. And I learn a lot about myself. It's a journey of self-awareness and growth, and we have to be kind to ourselves in that journey when we come across a situation or something, and we have to sit back and say, oh, I need to check my bias on that. This is something new, and not feel bad about it. It's just part of the human, it's part of who we are as humans, but we have to be aware of it and grow with it. And the journey, and so it's about individual self-awareness and growth, but it's also about disrupting systems that are oppressing for our students, right? And those systems are at the district level. There's systems at the building level, and then there's systems within the classroom. And those are all systems. Teachers, we create systems in classrooms, and we have to see what we're doing there and examining our practice. And I agree, Mary and Dr. Whitaker, that it's hard. It's hard. And sometimes, you want to quit and give up, but you can't, because it's really about our students, and it's about our future moving forward.
And I think there's so much to unpack in this little conversation. And I'm a kind of person that likes to make it so that we can really have like just a few strong takeaways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of ask each of you to come up with one talking point that you think teachers really need to understand when we're talking about equity and their perspective of equity. So that's we're going to end with a summary of what we just talked about.
So I'll start, and I'm going to borrow from a scholar that I follow, a lot and have a ton of respect for, and it's Dr. Milner. And he says, "Start where you are." The African proverb: "Start where you are, but don't stay there."
I think what came to my mind, and just listening to Rita a second ago, I'm always drawing back to, of course, my own personal journey as a parent and as an educator, because I've worn two hats. And I think about inclusion and the fact that so many people, again, don't really understand what inclusion truly means. That sense of belonging, that sense of acceptance in the classroom. And I think of Douglas Bicklin from Syracuse University. He used to say that if we really want to understand the true meaning of inclusion, we need to look to families. Because in families, we see how they have fully included this child within the family. So I just think of that word inclusion, Jesse, and we still have so much work to do there.
The one thing that I would love to offer, and I appreciate the question, Jesse, is that we have to move from embarrassment to true equity. And I think it goes back to what my colleague said earlier. And that is, we have to get over our stuff, our own fragility, whatever fragility that is, our own biases, and be committed to equity. Because oftentimes what I've seen within my own time of doing this work is that folks just want the embarrassment to go away. And they want the scandal to go away. They want the rumor to go away. They want the language that was shared on social media to go away. And then after it goes away, they can say, whoo, we survived it. But true equity is sitting in our stuff, getting over our own embarrassment and all of those things that reside within us, so that we can fully serve the students and the communities that we are blessed to be fellowship with.
Right, and Jesse, I'm sorry, I meant to say too with inclusion that I don't think we can truly understand inclusion if we don't understand.
Thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation. As many of you have alluded to, there's a lot of work to do, but this is a great place to begin the conversation. And we appreciate your time. I think I speak on behalf of Jesse and I when I say thank you so much. And we're glad that you were able to join us for this talk.